Looks like everything has connected up, and it's so good to have each one of you with us tonight. Looking forward to this topic. As soon as I put out the ad for this discussion tonight, I had several messages indicating that this was a very timely session. This was something that lots of people were interested in. So I'm glad to be able to have this discussion tonight. So looking forward to it and hope that you will, of course, participate as we go through together. So, again, good evening, everybody. Welcome to Looking Forward Live. Tonight, our topic is the wounded helper, how our own pain can become wisdom without becoming our identity. Now, this is a personal and I think pastoral topic because many of us who help others don't come to the work untouched. We all come with our own stories. We come with losses, with family wounds, spiritual wounds, grief. We come with failures, with regrets, and places where life has humbled us. So the question tonight isn't whether wounded people can help. Um, Often, the people who have suffered the most deeply can become some of the most compassionate helpers. So, the deeper question is how our wounds can become wisdom without becoming the whole story of who we are. So, we're going to talk about pain, we're going to talk about compassion, boundaries, healing, and the difference between helping from our wounds and being ruled by them. So let's go ahead and get kicked off. I always want to express why these types of conversations matter. This conversation matters because many helpers are indeed wounded helpers. Pastors, parents, counselors, caregivers of all types, teachers, ministry leaders and friends often become helpers because they know what pain feels like. They remember what it was like to feel alone, to be confused, to feel ashamed, and to be unsupported. And they want to be for someone else what they actually needed in those circumstances. And that can be extremely beautiful. But it can also become dangerous if we don't recognize when our own wound is driving the helping. So if I'm trying to rescue someone else in order to avoid my own pain, I might call that compassion when it actually is some unresolved grief. If I need to be needed, I may overfunction and then become resentful. So tonight, we're not rejecting the wounded healer or helper. We're learning how to become a healthier one. Okay. So again, your wound may explain your compassion, but it doesn't have to define your identity and who you are. So, what is a wounded helper? The wounded helper is someone whose own suffering has opened them to the suffering of others. This doesn't mean the helper is broken beyond usefulness. It means the helper has been touched by life. We often trust people who know something from the inside. A person who has grieved can often sit with grief differently. A person who has wrestled with anxiety may have more patience with someone who panics. A person who has survived religious shame may recognize shame in others much more quickly. But the key is this: the wound must be integrated, not just simply exposed. Unintegrated pain often demands attention. Integrated pain can become wisdom. So, again, pain becomes wisdom when it has been named, when it has been grieved, and when it's been integrated. So, pain can definitely become wisdom to us, but it doesn't become wisdom automatically. Pain can make us tender, but it can also make us defensive. Pain can give us insight, but at the same time it can also create blind spots. Integrated pain has been named, grieved, and brought into the larger stories of our lives. An unhealed pain often remains in charge. It can make us over identify with others. It can make us need their progress in order to feel okay. It can make us need, or it can make us angry when we see that they don't choose what we wish we had chosen. So let me say this again. It can make us need their progress in order for us to feel okay. And the problem with this is it can make us extremely angry when the other person that we're trying to help doesn't choose what we wished we would have chosen. Okay. Wisdom isn't pretending that the wound never happened. Wisdom is being able to say, yes, this has shaped me, but it doesn't have to control me. Okay. The danger of making pain your identity. Let's look at this just for a moment. One danger for wounded helpers is making pain the center of their identity. Uh, Sometimes we've lived with a wound for so long that we don't know who we're who we are without it. It can become the lens through which every relationship is interpreted. We begin to see danger everywhere. We begin to hear rejection in every disagreement. We begin to confuse someone else's story with our own unresolved story. So when pain becomes identity, healing can feel threatening because we wonder, who will we be if we no longer organize our life around this wound? But healing does not have to erase your story. It gives your story a better place to live. Now, there are signs that the wound may be leading your life. If I feel personally responsible for another person's healing, I am probably carrying more than belongs to me. If I need to be needed in order to feel valuable, I may be using helping to regulate my own sense of self worth. If I become resentful when my help is not received, I may need to ask whether I was offering love or trying to control the outcome. If I can't separate compassion from control, then my helping may be more about anxiety rather than about love and grace. Okay, because these signs are not reasons for you to just feel ashamed. These are just invitations for your awareness. Okay, because awareness isn't condemnation, it's actually the doorway to freedom. So we have to bring things to the surface and give you a way to understand why you're doing some of the things that you're doing and why these things seem to repeat themselves. Now, for Christian people or people of faith, Jesus gives us a, just an amazing model of wounded compassion. The Christian story doesn't give us a distant, transcendent, untouched God. It gives us a suffering Christ. But Jesus didn't help from panic, resentment, or a need to be needed. He didn't help from that perspective. He moved towards suffering with compassion, but he also withdrew to have time to himself and to pray and to meditate. He didn't heal every person in every place at every moment. The gospel accounts are full of these times where Jesus went into a place and he healed certain people, but lots of people weren't. There's lots of sick and lots of all types of people out there, but not everywhere. And in some cases, you can go back and read the Gospels. It's uh, just he that wasn't the full range of everything he was trying to do. And he refused to be controlled by the crowds, by religious leaders, or by the demands of others. So his wounds become a place of redemption rather than a place of bitterness. And this matters for helpers because we're not called to be saviors. And let me please reiterate this again. We are not called to be saviors. We're called to be faithful. We're called to be compassionate. And we're called to be honest people who know our own limitations. So understand this, and this is why I have it outlined and highlighted on the screen. Compassion does not require you to become the savior. And as I say this each week, when we talk about this from a faith perspective or a Christian perspective, is you are not Jesus. You may be the hands and feet of Jesus. You may emulate and you may follow the teachings of Jesus. You may try to live out his moral life, but believe you me, you're still not Jesus. You can have Jesus living inside of you. You can have a deep belief and faith in God. That doesn't mean you're God. It doesn't mean you're Jesus. So just know you have limitations, and it's okay to be honest about that. Okay. What is helping then? Well, first off, we have to deal with the fact that helping is not rescuing. Helping is not the same as rescuing. Helping respects the other person's agency. Rescuing just takes over. Helping offers your presence, where rescuing tries to become the solution. Helping tells the truth with compassion, whereas rescuing often avoids truth because it's afraid of discomfort. Helpers can walk with people, but we cannot live their lives for them. We can provide support, but we cannot choose for other people. We can encourage, but we cannot force transformation. When helping becomes rescuing, both people usually lose. The helper becomes exhausted, and the other person may become less empowered. That's why it's important to respect another person's dignity and agency. And you can believe that people can, you know, make choices in their life. They can take ownership without you taking ownership and becoming the solution to all things. Now, let's talk for a moment about boundaries. Boundaries are essential for wounded helpers. Boundaries protect the helper and the person that's being helped. Boundaries are not barriers against love, they are structures that make healthy love possible. If I don't know where I end and another person begins, I may call that closeness, but it's actually more an enmeshment. So, boundaries allow me to care without carrying everything. You don't have to carry everything. They also allow the other person to carry what belongs to them. And that's a very important thing for the other person. They also allow the other person to carry the very things that the things they're responsible to carry. Now, in pastoral care and in counseling and ministry and family life, boundaries protect everyone involved. They keep us from using another person's healing to meet our own need for significance. So, before we move on from this, remember you are allowed to care without being the one that's carrying everything. So, how do wounds become wisdom? So, how do we turn wounds into wisdom? As some of the old preachers used to say, how do you turn trials into testimonies? This sort of thing. First, we name what happened. This is an important step. We stop minimizing, spiritualizing, or pretending that it didn't matter. Second, we grieve. We acknowledge what was lost, what was delayed, what was damaged, and what we needed but didn't receive. Thirdly, we notice that the wound has made us sensitive. We we notice what it's made us sensitive to. Perhaps we recognize shame quickly. Perhaps we notice loneliness in somebody else before other people do. Perhaps we understand fear better than anybody. So finally, we ask how that sensitivity can serve by loving people without ruling us. So wisdom means the wound has a voice, but it doesn't have the final word. All right, let's walk through this again. Name what happened without letting it become all of you. Grieve what was lost, what was delayed, or what got damaged. Maybe it was your emotional state, maybe it was your nervous system, maybe it was relationships with parents or children or spouse, neighbors, friends, whoever. Notice what your wound makes you sensitive to. And then finally, ask how your story can serve in loving others without ruling you. Now, wounded helpers, again, they need support too. You need support. I need it. We need places where we can tell the truth without performing strength. Helpers often become skilled at being useful while avoiding their own pain. But unprocessed pain leaks everywhere. It may leak out as control, as irritability, it can be numbness, it can be avoidance or burnout. It can also be a savior complex or what can be called saviorism. This is why counseling, um, supervision, maybe spiritual direction, or somebody you trust, somebody you know in your own community that you trust. We need people who can ask us honest questions. Just like, they can ask things like, why did that affect you so strongly? Or what did this stir up in your own background or your own story? Or here's a good one. Are you trying to help them or are you trying to repair something in yourself? This is why we need close friends in our lives or family members or somebody we can talk to that you can be honest with them while at the same time they can be honest with you and ask you maybe some uncomfortable questions, but they're honest questions. So, healthy helpers keep growing. A healthy helper is still somebody that needs help too. So let's always remember that we're always growing. We don't always have all the answers. We're not the answer person. A healthier helper learns to ask good questions. Again, what is mine to carry here and what belongs to the other person? Am I helping from a place of love and grace, or am I helping from my own anxiety? Uh, what is this stirring up again in my own past, my own background, my own story? What does faithful presence look like here? How can I be present for this person without solving all the issues? What boundaries would protect love and grace in this situation? And then, where do I need support? Where can I get it? These questions help slow us down. And sometimes we definitely have to have that. They help us move from reaction to reflection. Many times, the difference between wounded helper and wise helping is the ability to pause, to reflect, maybe to pray or meditate, and to seek counsel from people that we trust before we act on something. As we do each session, let's just reflect tonight. I want to invite you to reflect with me tonight. Think about that this week. Think about these questions, what pain has made you more compassionate? What's the thing in your past that has created this compassionate drive within you? And then where might that same pain still be leading you? I can tell you now, me going through this PhD program in psychology and counseling, um, each of us, it seems like when we first started, the group I'm going through with, and even my professors and those that's guiding us through the program, are all wounded healers and wounded helpers, and all have a background and a story. There's just things that are driving us toward this profession or this compassion. Uh, So I'd ask you even more questions. Do you feel guilty when you can't fix somebody or you can't fix all their problems? Uh, these are some standard questions I ask counselors or pastors or helpers or, people doing social work. um, what part of your story still needs more care? What part of your background maybe needs some care, maybe needs to be integrated? What would it mean for you to help without disappearing? Could you help somebody else without disappearing into the problems? or what the solutions you're trying to offer. These questions, again, they're not meant to shame anybody. They're not meant to just make you feel uncomfortable on purpose, but there can be some discomfort in honesty. I think of one of the proverbs, that the uh, the wounds of a friend are much more valuable than the kisses of an enemy. So this is not new wisdom. This is ancient wisdom. So the wounded helper doesn't need to pretend to be untouched by life or what's happened in the past. The wounded helper also does not have to be trapped. We can honor our past, our story, and we can still grow beyond it. It can be such a source of strength. So as we close today, I just want to say this clearly. Your pain can shape your compassion without becoming your identity. Your story can deepen your wisdom without becoming a prison. Your wounds may help you recognize suffering in others, but they don't have to control how you love, how you serve, how you parent, how you do counseling, how you pastor, or how you relate to other people. A wounded helper is not someone who is without pain. A healthy wounded helper is someone who is learning to let pain be transformed into compassion, into humility, and ultimately into some wisdom. You're allowed to help others while still receiving help yourself. And you're allowed to have limits. It's okay. You're allowed to heal. So I hope this helps. I hope we can be a help to those that are helping. And if this conversation has helped you, I invite you to share it with someone who carries a lot for others. I invite you to share this and let me know how this has helped, that somehow we can encourage and help one another. Again, thank you for being part of this session. At Looking Forward Counseling, our desire is to create a space where people can bring their whole story with honesty, with compassion, and with courage. If you're a helper, a caregiver, a pastor, a parent, or someone who had carried pain all this time, just for a long time, I hope tonight reminded you that healing is not selfish. It's a part of becoming a healthier presence for others. So have a great night. Thank you for joining me. And if you could just send me a note, an email, let me know how this is. I really appreciate it and look forward to seeing you again in our next session.